Good morning. I'm State Representative Carol Ammons, Carol-Ammons. I represent the 103rd District in Illinois. I'm also the Joint Caucus Chair of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. I am so honored to stand here today. This is a long time coming. I began working on pretrial fairness in 2017 with an organization called 3 Days Count out of Washington, D.C. It's a national organization that has been making this argument for many generations, actually, and we're kind of behind the times in implementation of a fair justice system that matches our Constitution federally and our state constitution. And so for my community members who are here, who've been working on this issue for a very long time, I am honored to stand with you today, representing the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus and the Illinois General Assembly. I am thankful to our members, those who voted for and against this legislation, those who were not sure that this is the right thing to do. 60+ organizations worked on this for multiple years because we knew it was the right thing to do, and it aligned with the constitutional protections that every citizen is supposed to be guaranteed. But that is not always the case, and that is not always how it works out. And so I am honored that our governor, back in 2020, actually, he made ending money bond one of his administration's top 3 priorities. The bail coalition that came together, the Coalition to End Money Bond and the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice, we thank you for your continuous fight over many years. And I want the public to understand that when we began to try to make legislative change, sometimes it takes many years to get to this point. The coalition stayed at it. The Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice stayed at it. The legislative members stayed at it. I want to thank our members, first and foremost, Senator Sims, LG Sims in the Senate, and Representative Justice Slaughter in the House, who started this fight and was joined later by our chairman in the Senate, Peters, who joined this fight when he became a Senate member, but he was an organizing member on the other side. And so that gives you a framework of how long this took for us to get to this point. I want to say to those who are not necessarily with us yet on this issue, before I do that, though, let me just remind myself that myself and my former Senator Scott Bennett served on the Illinois Court Commission on Pretrial Practices that came after 3 Days Count, because the Supreme Court understood that we needed a new system. We didn't need just to end money bond. We needed a comprehensive look at the entirety of the criminal legal system under the leadership of Judge Stuckert. I want to thank her for her leadership on the Supreme Court, because she did an amazing job pulling all of the stakeholders together. Everyone was involved in this, even though later they said they weren't. We had the Sheriff's Association at the table. The State's Attorney Association, the public defenders was at the table. The judicial, the advocacy organizations were at the table from the very beginning. And to this point and to this day, we hope that they have taken the initiative of the people and will respond to the legislation in the legal framework for which it exists. Those who are attempting to say that they will not implement this law will be violating the law themselves. And we call upon them, the court stakeholders, to properly implement the Pretrial Fairness Act on today. This law was supported by people across our state, passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor, and then challenged at the highest court in our state. It has stood all of the inspection, and we hope that people will take this and utilize it in the most positive of ways and not use backdoor methods to prevent people from getting justice in our courts. Every member of the State's Attorneys Association has a responsibility to call on its members to cease all attempts at the continued deliberate obstruction of this law once it's implemented as of today. The General Assembly will not walk away from this process. It has taken many years for us to simply follow the Constitution. And what the Constitution tells us is that cash was always supposed to be the last option. It was never supposed to be the first option, and it was never supposed to be building budgets for county jails and courts. Every Illinois deserves a court system that follows both the letter of the law and its spirit. This is true whether you reside in a large county or a small one, in an urban area or a rural setting. We are seeking protection for people who are innocent until they are actually proven guilty. That is what the Constitution guarantees every U.S. citizen, and we intend to make sure that it is implemented in the fairest of ways. Let me just remind our colleagues who are in the criminal legal system on the executive side of this question. We want you to know that we are supportive of you. And as we implement every single law in the state of Illinois, sometimes there's something wrong with it, or we need to go back and do X, Y, and Z. We will always listen to our stakeholders and try to make sure that we're implementing the law in the fairest of ways. But we will not repeal. We will not do backdoor practices in the next General Assembly to try to unravel this one. We will be ever vigilant and diligent in our work to oversee the implementation of this. Lastly, I'll say that the Supreme Court not only started on the front end with the commission, but they also put us on the back end after the passage of the law with the task force for its implementation. The Supreme Court has done an amazing job looking at the law, making the changes that are necessary for its implementation, and to make sure all judges are trained for the new law. That is the role of the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, and all of our judges are working in the same process. We call on them to ensure that judges, whether in a big or small county, will implement the law effectively and fairly. Do not hold people that should not be held if they are not a risk, and it's a demonstrable risk according to the implementation strategy, that you must demonstrate what makes them a risk to hold them beyond the time that's set in the implementation of the law. So we look forward to this. We, yes, celebrate today all of the hard work of all of you, all of the members of the legislature, the governor's office, and all of the staff that work to pull these things together. This is no easy feat, but we are certainly not convinced yet that every state's attorney will implement the law fairly, and we call on the state's attorney to put out support for the law as the law exists, and that they will implement the law with justice and equity. Thank you so much.